Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your Friday morning with us on this morning's workshop. It is definitely going to be a very interesting one. I'm very much looking forward to it, to our online tools and tips for successful virtual events and productive meetings. The meeting is going to be, or the workshop will be led by Giulia Gouge, who has over 20 years of experience and communication. And so that is awesome. Wealth of knowledge. She's also the founder of SheSoSocial, digital media sync, and agents of branding. So Giulia most certainly has a lot of information and great wisdom to share with us today. I do want to mention just a few housekeeping pieces. Everyone is currently muted. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a burning question or something you would like to share. You can also use the chat feature. You can access chat on the bottom toolbar of your Zoom, and I will be monitoring the chat as it goes along and sharing questions. The session is also being recorded, and so feel free to turn your video on or off, whatever you're comfortable with. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Giulia.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And again, I just wanted to reiterate that I will be taking questions. I believe we're going to be doing about 60 minutes of the actual presentation, and then I'll do 30 minutes of questions. So hopefully I'll be able to, definitely be able to get a hold of everybody. The presentation is available. I'm going to be making a PDF of it as well, and there are some links that are available as far as the resources that I've used to provide this presentation, and then my own experiences as well. I have some notes on that. So I'm going to focus mostly on the event side of it, and a lot of it also would pertain to meetings as well. So when it pertains to a meeting, I'll just note that. But we know that right now, these days, more and more events and more occasions and meetings are being done virtually. And that's likely to continue whether or not we go into a full in-person mode in any of these one occasions. So I just wanted to go through some of the aspects and make basically a checklist of what you want to think about, and specifically for events. Now, these could be fundraising events, these could be educational events, these could be business events. So we'll go through what that looks like. So obviously the very first thing is to create a plan well ahead of time. And if you know that there's an event that's coming up, I know a lot of times for our nonprofits, the two really big events are three, or our annual gala, Giving Tuesday, and then the Great Give. So these are all things that you can plan for well in advance. So from the perspective of online, these are the things to think about, and I'll go over each one of them specifically in more detail after I run through the list. So the first thing to do is establish what that format is going to be. Determine the platform, assign roles for pre, during, and post event. And some people may have multiple roles throughout, so you really want to be very careful as to what these job descriptions are going to look like, and that everybody has the tools that they need and the resources in order to make things work. Define access to the event. Pick a time. This is always one that I know a lot of people kind of go back and forth about as far as what's available time-wise. Registering, and understanding that registering really means collecting data to use going forward. Document a promotion plan. Make sure you test out the technology. That's something that we actually did this morning, and I found out that my video was not working in this particular case, but I am able to share my screen, so it was really good that we took 10 minutes ahead of time to kind of run through everything and test out the technology. Will people still have access to the event once it's over? Revisit that data, and then of course say thank you. So establishing a format, what does that mean? If you understand what format you're utilizing, whether it's going to be a presentation like this particular event is, a discussion, are people going to be allowed to come in and out and converse, interview, or a panel, or a mixed bag of some sort. So oftentimes when events are longer and more complex, it's really good to have different formats available so that the attention span is constantly really up and enthusiastic. Will Q&A be involved? So this is something that we had discussed earlier. There will be a Q&A session at the end. If there's a burning question, leave it in the chat. Make sure that these are things that are available and communicated ahead of time. And will there be any kind of networking or mingling either before or after? And I'm going to close the door actually right now. That's a garbage truck that's actually going to be leaving very soon. I'm on the first floor of an office building in my office for probably the third time. Okay, so establishing a format. If this is something that is going to be running for more than an hour, leave some time to take a break. When we're going through our workday online, one of the things that I've actually learned is to take 20 seconds every 20 minutes to look 20 feet ahead of you. So this is just a nice little personal piece of advice. But when you're running a presentation and it's going to be running for a long time, just take a little break. So if this runs for an hour, leave some time. If this runs for more than 2 hours, break up the event into 20-minute chunks. Just have a pause for everybody and just establish that in the beginning as well. Okay, determining platforms. I really could do a whole presentation just on this alone. Many of the events, I've seen fundraising events and actually helped run fundraising events online. I've run webinars online. I'm actually running one right now that goes every Tuesday, and I'm on Facebook Live all the time. So utilizing social media platforms like Facebook Live, Instagram. If anybody wants to raise their hands, I can see if you raise your hand even though you're muted. If you have run any events on their social media platforms. And then there's closed events like this particular one, which is on Zoom, but there's also other platforms as well. IBM has a platform called in the IBM Cloud. Webinar Ninja is another one. Teachable is actually another one that's utilized for education and information, and Hivebryte. So there's many more kind of closed platforms that are only for those who are invited, and there's either a password or some form of entry, of gated entry. Another one that I actually use is Jitsi. It's Jitsi, and then 8x8. 8x8 is the number 8, the X, and then the number 8.com. And those are two that have a freemium and then a premium version as well, which is the same for Zoom and Hivebri and so forth. And then you have multi-stream. So if you want to make your event very, very available on multiple platforms, there's ways of doing that as well. So that would be StreamYard. StreamYard is one that I actually utilize, and I can stream out to Facebook, to Instagram, LinkedIn, and other platforms as well. So you want, when you're determining your platform, you want to understand what that platform is actually going to do from you from a technology standpoint, how functional it is, how user-friendly it is, and also how accessible it is to everybody that's involved. And we're going to talk about accessibility later. So for live streaming and utilizing the social platforms, one of the things that YouTube has had for a long time is closed caption. This is something that's fairly new for Facebook, and I'm really happy that they're doing that, because oftentimes not having closed captioning or any sort of translation is making it inaccessible to quite a group of people. Zoom also has the ability to close caption. So this is just one of the things to take into consideration from a functionality standpoint. The other thing that you want to do is actually test out the technology that you're utilizing. So I have been, for example, working from my home for a period of time. I want to make sure that I have the capacity to run an event from wherever I am and not have any of it dropped or anything like that. So whenever you're testing out, if you're moving from one location to another, today I decided it would be a good idea to come into my office. I'm much more happy with the internet. I feel like it's actually going to work. Test out your platforms as well. You don't want to be learning your new platform that you just purchased or that you just loaded the day of, or a couple of hours before you start running an event, no matter how big or small it is. Think about the lighting as far as where you are as well. Test that out. So a lot of times, if you just have light facing towards you, that should be enough. But you can also invest in special lights. A lot of very small personal ring lights are very easy to purchase. So that works out as well. And then test your audio as well, and make sure ahead of time that people can hear you. So again, I know that when I came into the room, one of the first things that I said was, can you hear me? What is the background noise like? Is that bothersome at all? And any other factors that have to be mitigated. So these are just things to think about as far as testing out your technology. The other thing as well, if you have multiple people presenting, coming in from multiple locations, is to have them come in ahead of time, 10 or 15 minutes, and do all of the testing then. I would actually test things out a week ahead of time if you have everything, all set up. And just make sure that every single piece of technology, lighting, audio, everything is working. And then just duplicate what you did when everything worked out just fine. And also understand and be forgiving when things don't necessarily work out. In this case, I had mentioned before, my video is not working, and it was working last night. but my share screen is working, and this is really all you need to see is the information and hear my voice. You also want to define access in your plan. So what does that mean? Is this free to all? Is there a cost, or are you asking for a donation, and do you have the items set up for that? Is there an early bird special discount? Establish the time and date that begins and ends. Is there tiered entry with special access? So I've seen that a lot in conferences, for example. So even in online cases, you can provide access, special access to somebody. So if this was a particular business presentation that I was doing, it may be decided that I would do the presentation, I would do a few Q&A questions, and then there would be time where a certain number of people who had paid a more premium cost would stick around, and there would be more of an offering available. So those are things to consider or think about. So what else does accessibility mean? I had mentioned this before, and I know that I've been thinking about this a lot from the perspective of when people are providing very important information online. I was looking at when government officials were having Facebook or Zoom calls, or any other kind of events where they're providing information. And I was noticing that there were certain things, and businesses as well, and other organizations, where accessibility may have been thought about, and then there were other times where it may not have been thought about. So thinking of things like having captioning, visuals that are easy to see. This particular presentation I made very clear, black and white, dark gray and white, the most contrast available. Provide documents in advance. A lot of times, people who have accessibility issues will want documents or any sort of materials provided to them in advance. One of the resources that is really very comprehensive and available is a website called respectability.org. And again, you can make a note of this, or I will make this particular presentation available to you, and the link is clickable. All right, this is always a point of contention when we're talking about when is the event going to happen and how is it going to happen. When picking a time and date, think about the day-to-day activities of your audience. So if you're appealing to the 9 to 5 crowd, Monday is probably not the best day to do so. Later in the week, when somebody may be needing a mental break or from their workload, that might be much better. We also have seen that the 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. slot, or 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the very latest slot, is a really good time for events. So it's kind of very close to what you would think in regular events as well. So again, when people are having actual fundraising events in person, it was usually, in the happy hour time, so to speak, or lunchtime, or if it's something that's educational or informational, again, those times are a little bit more conducive to people's schedules. Before work time is also a very good time as well. So a weekly event that I run from 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning, and people recognize that, it's going to be at a very specific time, one day a week, and they can decide whether or not they can fit that into their schedule. The great thing about platforms, and again, when we go back to considering platforms, is the ability to record and provide that particular event later at any given time. The social media platforms like Facebook also does the same thing as well. And then streaming platforms that are multi-stream platforms will also make a recording of that particular event, have it available to you as a file, and then you can re-upload it into, say, your website or your YouTube channel or your video channel. So again, that's something else to take into consideration. And if you're thinking about it from a fundraising standpoint as well, you can also extend the time. You know, instead of having a fundraising day, so to speak, a fundraising few days or a fundraising week, and then judge what your sense of urgency is in your communications. And then if you are regional or multi-regional, keeping time zones in mind too. So if you're based on the East Coast, starting an online event at 9 a.m. Will most likely be too early for some attendees on the West Coast. So that's something to take into consideration as well. All right, I am going to stop here and take a tiny break, just a couple of minutes. And if anybody needs to get up and get a cup of coffee or take a sip of water or ruminate on any questions that they may have, I'm going to follow my own advice and just take a couple of minutes out and then continue. This particular event is runs until 10 a.m. So we're probably going to have just one more, just 2-minute break, if that's okay. And if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask questions, they can do so. I'll still be here.
Hi, this is Rosie.
Hi.
I had a question. You mentioned under determining platforms, you were talking about Zoom and all of that, but you mentioned JIT something and 8x8.com. I believe I wanted to, that wasn't listed on your slide.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw that into, it's in the notes, and the link to that is in the notes. So it is JITSI.com. And then 8x8 is just the number 8 times 8.com. And the thing about, I just wanted to mention about 8x8.com, you can actually have a what's considered a large room. So I actually have a personal 8x8. So it's 8x8.com/agents of branding. And my room is an additional / after agents of branding with my name. And then my business partner has the same thing, where it's 8x8.com/agents of branding / Mason. So we can utilize the same tool, the same platform, and be in separate rooms holding separate meetings. So that may be something to consider for a small group. You know, if you are servicing constituents or having multiple meetings, or even if you're having a larger meeting or an event and then you want to have a breakout in the same way that you would for Zoom, for example. So hopefully that answers your question. And yes, I'll have that in the presentation.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we do have another question that came in through the chat.
Okay, great.
It's asking, Giulia, if you can please speak to the security and the privacy of the various platforms.
Yeah. So basically, and I know that one thing that happened with Zoom was that there was, you know, some issues with Zoom. So what they did was they made the default a password. No platform is 100% secure. I mean, that's the true answer there. So there's ways that platforms do try to make themselves secure with various manners of gating. One of the ways to do so is to, obviously have a password. Do not broadcast what the room actually is as well. I know a lot of times I would see people put on a Facebook event, broadcast to everybody what the Zoom room was. And oftentimes the easiest way to kind of tamp that down is to hold the event outside of that. So actually have a registration process so that the only people who can get access to that particular room at that time is to, fill out a form basically, or go to a secure site. The other thing to do too is to actually put that that platform into a secure area on your site as well. So have a link available in the secure area. So yeah, that's definitely an issue. There's no, the short answer is that there's no guarantees to the security of a particular event. All right. Any other questions? So I'm going to move forward and continue.
There seem to be questions in the chat, I believe.
Oh, do I have the chat available to me here?
You should have the chat available, Julia, if you just click on it, but there is one more question.
Here we go, okay.
That just came in recently. It's the very last one. It asks, will you be speaking to the multi-level service platforms that offer services of auction, donation, ticket sales versus Zoom or Facebook Live, which Dawn believes may not offer those event services?
So you're saying ticket sale services and auction services and that sort of thing? Yeah, oftentimes I have extra materials regarding that as well. And oftentimes those particular services also are, come as a premium or are part of a larger package. And each individual platform, has different cases and different iterations as well. So much like going into the whole technology area of the other platforms, that would take a whole other presentation.
It's confusing.
What's that?
It's very confusing when you're looking at these providers.
All of the providers are the ones that are specifically to auction.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, they really, really are. I would think that each particular platform would actually need their own presentation. One of the things to take into consideration, though, I would say when you're looking at any platforms at all, and it's just a general point of recommendation or suggestion, is to, basically just Google best of, type of platform, whether it's donation based, or I know that when we were doing GiveGab, even though that wasn't a particularly video based, there's some noise in the background. Is that? There were definitely multiple information and education events kind of around how to use that particular, platform. And they have very specific needs. So what I would say is think about what you need from a platform and go through a checklist of what's available for that platform. And I would ask about, the functionality and ease of use for each of those platforms as well. So hopefully that's helpful.
We have another question.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on recording all virtual teaching sessions with students for the organization and instructors' protection?
So from the perspective of security or from the perspective of what's being said? I think I don't understand the question, and I just want to make sure that I do before I answer it, because I can go two ways here.
So in regards to liability.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. So from the perspective, obviously what you want to do is make sure that in the same way that you have sign-offs for, I know when kids go to camp, say, and there's those model sheets. So it's basically saying if somebody takes a picture and then utilizes it for an article or an ad or a social media post, you give permission in order to do this. So from that perspective, I would say I would talk to somebody who knows about recording video. And I'm assuming this means having people's faces online on that particular video and their voices and what they're saying. But from the perspective of teaching, recording video and having that available is really very useful for a variety of reasons. So going back to the liability part of it, I would think about what documents and signatures are needed in order to continue that process.
So it looks like those are the only questions that have come in.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Going back to the recording, I'm interested in, I've been on 2 Zoom presentations where individuals did inappropriate things. And, we're teaching young kids, and God forbid somebody in the household does something, and one of the parents is upset about it and decides, they'd like to pursue this and sue us. I'm just curious if it would be wise to record everything, to have documentation of what took place, or perhaps a child says, the teacher said this, the teacher said that, as some sort of protection for us.
Yeah, again, that's a really interesting legal issue as well, from that perspective. And I would say, so this is really interesting, bringing somebody who has legal knowledge as far as recording into a presentation situation would be really interesting. And that's actually something that I would want to do. I do a lot of online presentations. And that's definitely a topic that needs to be addressed, not only from the perspective of whether you're in a situation between a teacher and a young person or an older person and a young person, but from all perspectives as well. So what's available in that case? So I know I didn't really answer your question because I don't have an answer for your question, but that's definitely something that should be taken into consideration from the perspective of safety and online safety issues, which is a parallel topic, I would think. But oftentimes, it's really interesting. I just wanted to make note of that, because oftentimes when we're thinking about recording things, we're thinking about recording things from the many people are thinking about recording things from the perspective of having something made available and accessible from the point of view of information, education, accessibility, and having it available for everybody. This, you know, these are very special cases, I would say, just in the same way that the question about having very specific answers to utilization of platforms. So again, that's something that would be a totally different different topic to explore for a whole hour. So you said that was the last question, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So I'll move on. So when we're talking about events, having a promotion plan for that particular event. And again, I'm not going to get into a whole big discussion on this as well, only because this would be a whole other presentation. And I'm actually making it a whole other presentation when I'm doing my own streaming. So having a promotion plan and calendar very much in advance. And everyone involved in the event should know the role that they're playing and the timeline of their role. A lot of times I know in these cases that people's times are very stretched, that you know, board members are volunteering their time. Staff people are very, very busy with many, many other roles as well. And that's why planning is so important. And again, knowing that there's something coming up that's an annual event or a quarterly event or a larger universal event that's happening. And I would say, and I know I've said this in other presentations before, planning out a whole year in advance or 6 months in advance, like right after the one event had happened. And when you're in the process of kind of going through and dissecting how that past event went, making notes for how you're going to plan that future event, and not just making notes, but putting it into a plan or a schedule while you're in that process. And that really kind of cuts down on the time that you're utilizing further down the road. So according to Adobe, registrations tend to spike 2 to 3 weeks before an event. So it's a good idea to even ramp up at this time, and having within your 6 month or 1 year plan that 2 to 3 weeks before you are going to be looking at a ramp up, and what does that mean? And definitely by that time, all of your messaging should be 100% solidified. You should definitely have your advocates on board as well, and every single piece should be in place at that point. So promotion should also be constant and consistent and collaborative. One of the things about events is nobody should feel like they are the only one working on that particular event and making all the pieces work. And especially from the perspective of promoting it, because you are getting so many different perspectives from a particular agency. So that's really, you know, something to think about as well. And then there's registration, which is otherwise known as collecting data. So registration should be simple on the side of the attendees, and on your side, connect to the database of the organization. So the simplicity part, the very first aspect of registration, and registration is not just a one-time thing. It doesn't mean you're just filling out a form and then you're done. when you're in the filling out the form process, that's where it's really the simple piece, right? You just want to grab the name, the email address, phone number, and maybe one or two important questions should be answered, and think about what those questions are that you want to ask. Oftentimes when I'm running events, I will ask questions as far as, what are you expecting out of this? What do you want to get out of this? When you walk away, what's the one thing that you're going to walk away with and feel good about? Further along the line, again, I've done presentations regarding databases and processes and drip campaigns and automation and that sort of thing. So even if you have a very simple email platform like MailChimp or Constant Contact, or you're using Salsa or whatever that is, or you're dumping an Excel spreadsheet into an email platform, the data that you are gathering throughout events, throughout the registration process of the event, is very important data. So where people are coming from, how they heard of you, what they are expecting from the process. All of that information is going to be very important for when you're continuing to communicate with them. And so I know at the end of the checklist I had put, thanking people, making sure that you say thank you. But when you're saying thank you, you're starting another conversation in this relationship with whether it's your constituents or whether it's the people you are providing for or serving, or the people who are your donors, your partners, sponsors, and that sort of thing. So thinking of registration as part of the relationship process is really, really important. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about as well in this process is going back up to assigning roles pre, during, and post event. It's really important because there's so many moving parts in an event to match up people to roles. So if you know somebody who is really great at understanding technology and having them make the decision as to what the technology process is going to be. So that means what are you going to use to sign people up? What are you going to use to promote? What are you going to use in order to communicate afterwards? Who is going to be speaking? Who's going to be giving the information to the speaker in order for them to be able to make their role as positive and informative as possible? So these are all things to take into consideration. During the event, as people are actually providing the service within the event or are playing their role, who's in the background, making sure that things roll along. So having a production person, so to speak, during the event is really very important. I know, again, the event that I run on a weekly basis, I'm the one who is either hosting a discussion or doing the presenting, but there's somebody backing me up to make sure that questions are getting answered and information is being provided. So an example of that is the platform that I utilize is called StreamYard. And what StreamYard does, it's like a little production studio. So there's banners, there's a logo, there's a ticker going across the bottom, there's comments that are coming in. All of these things are moving along, and somebody is beside me virtually helping me out by putting questions on the screen, taking things that I've said and putting that up on the screen as information. So if I mention a website, that person has already had that website typed out because they've seen my presentation, and they're ready to drop the name of that website onto the screen so that people can see what it is that I'm talking about, and they can make note of it, either in person in that particular time of the event or after the event, so that that's readily available and can be viewable very easily. And then I can concentrate on looking at the screen, envisioning the fact that I'm looking at an audience perhaps, and not be looking down at notes or trying to click on the next, piece of information, that sort of thing. So these are definitely things to take into consideration in the during process. And also, that person can be feeding information, especially again, if you are on a platform where you're live streaming and you're gathering funds, so to speak, or taking questions, and that person can kind of make a note online or interject or that sort of thing and say, hey, we're at 75% of where we need to be. Here are some things we want to specifically thank this person or this organization specifically. We have a special guest that just kind of ran in, that sort of thing. And then post-event, what does that look like from the perspective of taking that event, packaging it, the materials, that sort of thing, and sending it out to the attendees, sending a thank you out, following up, asking additional questions, providing information based on how that event went and what the takeaways are. So considering what those takeaways are as well is very important.
We do have a number of questions that have come through on chat.
Yep.
It would now be a good time to take those?
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock and we have another 20-minute period in like 30 seconds. So.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Okay. So it said, the question I have here is, what's the best tool for integrating pre-recorded and live event components?
So pre-recorded and live event recording. So any of your multi-streaming platforms, I had mentioned StreamYard was one, so you can bring video into that. Vimeo is another one. What else is there? I'm going to pop right back up. Usually it's your multi-streaming. Restreamio is another one, and Crowdcast is another one.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we have an organization that collects demographic information of the folks that attend their events.
Yeah.
And the question is, do you recommend asking the questions around demographics at the point of registration or after the event in the evaluation survey?
From the perspective of demographics. So oftentimes, yeah, that's definitely, if you are collecting data, I would say gathering information throughout. And I know one of the platforms that I really love as far as collecting data easily or making up forms is Eventbrite. So that is definitely a platform where it's easy to ask a lot of questions and then have that information available afterwards. You know, and they even have little charts and graphs as well, as far as that's concerned. But yeah, again, thinking from the perspective of process, when you're looking at registration, one of the first things that you think about from any organizational standpoint is the ease of registration. So a lot of times, if you just want to get the person registered, so to speak. So the most important information to your particular organization, whatever that is, if you're asking a couple of different questions, have that be the questions that you're asking up front. And then as you're communicating throughout and you are describing the type of experience that you are hoping to provide, again, you can ask questions during that period of time. So from a process standpoint, it should be very conversational, even if you're gathering the data at the very beginning of the process as opposed to the end of the process.
Great, thank you. We have
Thanks.
one more question.
Yeah.
Could you share the websites, the websites for the platforms that you use, and how many participants will each of those platforms? How many participants can manage each of those platforms?
Each of those platforms, yeah, sure. So from the perspective of, I know I had mentioned StreamYard, and that was something that I had said I used as far as restreaming. It obviously streams out to, you know, any number of people on any number of platforms. So, you know, we'll go on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and so far as social platforms. As far as bringing guests on board, originally StreamYard allowed 6 people. It now allows 10 people. So if you have a panel or a discussion with multiple persons, you're able to bring up to 10 people into the studio with you. There's also a green room, so to speak, available on StreamYard. So you can have all 10 people on screen, or you can bring them up in any, you know, number, 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 6 at a time. And there's a share screen feature as well. So that's one of the items that are available. Facebook live stream, you can bring multiple people online. When you're on YouTube, you can bring multiple people online. The restream, you can bring multiple people, 8x8 as well. You can bring, again, multiple people in the same way that you can bring multiple people on with Zoom. And in that question, that they want to actually take a look at what the platform looked like.
So, this is the organization is looking to run a 900-person event. It's going to be their 39th annual event this November, and so they're looking at Hova. And they want to know if you are familiar with this platform.
Not as much as Crowdcast, which is another large venue, so to speak, event that's available. And I actually do have a list of platforms that are for much, much larger organizations and organizational conference type events. And that's actually in this, I have my list of resources. So in here, how to run a virtual event for 18,000 registrants, which I had no idea that this was something that was going to come up. So I'm super glad that I get to bring that up. But yeah, that's in my presentation as well, or in the resources for the presentation as well. And there are about 8 others, 8 other platforms that are for, again, much larger conferences and many more moving parts, including the registration process at the beginning, the communication process, and so forth. So these are very large platforms with many moving parts, and oftentimes there's a price tag that's attached to it. Sometimes you can get a freemium version or a discounted version for not-for-profits.
So there's one last question. I will be sharing this morning's slides with everyone who joined us this morning. And so you will get that. But we have an individual who is looking to, they want to know if it is possible for you to share previous recordings from the different platforms that you've mentioned. So if you have a recording that you can share from StreamYard or Restreamio, etc., so that the individual has an idea or an experience of how that translates.
Yep. So actually, the best example I have is a website where I'm working with this particular organization. It's a co-working space. And we actually have 3 quote-unquote programs that we are working on right now. And I actually use this for digital media sync. So this is where I'm using StreamYard. So I'm going to go to the website. And just let me know that you can see that I'm moving to a different. So this is programming that we actually ran through StreamYard. And then we were able to save it. And so this is still on Facebook. It is still on YouTube. We're moving it over to LinkedIn. So this is a video that we can we packaged and we can take it anywhere, including on this particular website. So I can, if I play this, it will show you where we're utilizing. So this is where we're on screen. And I'm going to move forward a little bit. So got a question for us, leave a comment in the comment section. We're bringing people's comments online. You can tell that this is from Facebook. If it were from YouTube, you can tell that it's from YouTube. This is also branded. It's another thing to think about. So if you look at the upper right-hand corner, it has the little logo up there, which is up there all the time. So that's one version. It has our names, so you know who we are. And you can see the background is branded as well. So this was a complete package of what that looks like. Is that helpful?
I think that may be helpful to the individual who asked the question. So a few of you have joined us this morning and have not provided your name. I have a couple folks that have called in. So we have 203-953-2076, and then we have an individual from an 860 extension. And then we also have an individual simply with the letter Y. If you guys can just either send me a private chat and let me know your full name or the organization that you're with, or you could also contact me via email and share that information. I just want to make sure that I have you captured as participating, because I will be following up from this morning's session, sending out not only the slides that Giulia will be sharing, but also a survey. And I want to make sure that I capture you. So I don't know which organization or which email address you're connected with. So if you could share that with me, that would be great. And then we have one last question. What are your thoughts on live versus pre-recorded speakers?
Ooh, okay. Put me on the spot there. So my preference is always to have, or as much as possible, have live speakers. So if you're, and it depends on the event, right? So I would say if you're going to have a pre-recorded speaker, what is the role of that pre-recorded speaker, right? So oftentimes, even in live events or conferences, you will have, this person can't make it right now. They're going to do, we're going to have a message from them, so to speak. So basically, it's what is the role of the messenger that's providing that pre-recorded version. And it also depends, too, on how accessible the event is for discussion or conversation. And usually the best events really work with availability and accessibility. So meaning that having a live person available somewhere in that particular event. So whether, obviously if you have the host that's guiding what that event looks like, you're dropping in a pre-recorded speech for a very specific aspect of that event, and then moving on to more live speaking, discussion, panel, that sort of thing. Because the other piece of that too is at some point you really do want to have access for conversation, especially in an online event, having that connection available that would usually be available in an in-person event. So that works the same for an organization as it would for a business type of event. I hope that answers the question. I don't know if I need to expound upon that anymore.
I think you answered the question. I haven't seen anything else come in through chat, so I think we're all set for right now.
Okay, perfect. Great, so I'm actually gonna go to my resources as well, and hopefully that will also be extremely helpful. So Eventbrite is actually one of the most, from the perspective of a more general platform that provides a very expansive capabilities. And it's also definitely a go-to. Their blog is very, very informative as it pertains to online events. So I'm going to put that up. And this is where I got quite a few of what I was, of the items that I was thinking about. This is mostly for businesses, but it also pertains to, this was another thing definitely that I did not have in my presentation, was thinking mobile. So we just saw that, or heard that some of these attendees are attending via their phones. So optimizing for a mobile experience when creating materials. So again, when I was talking about accessibility, I was talking about making things easily viewable or easily audible. And this is definitely an aspect to think about as far as maximizing text size and minimizing visuals. So as you saw in my particular presentation, I did not have a lot of visuals or any visuals at all, so to speak. But making it very simple for a mobile device as well. And then this again is something that I had talked about as far as choosing a platform. And these are other questions to take into consideration. Is it in your budget? Does it have the features you need? And I think that was definitely something when somebody had asked a question, I said, you know, think about what it is that you need as far as features. Including recordings, including surveys, including being able to utilize pre-recorded material, security issues, how many attendees are needed, can join. These are additional platforms, which included WebEx, and at this point they were saying Google Hangouts, which I think is now called Google Meet. Another aspect, documenting your process so that you do not have to ask the same questions over and over again. You know, that was one of the first things, is have a plan, stick to the plan. If the plan doesn't work, fix the part of the plan that didn't work, but don't throw away the whole plan. These are some aspects of the marketing. Creating a landing page, writing a blog post, utilizing email. Start on time. Prepping Q&A questions, which is interesting, just in case the audience is not engaged as you expected. Creating interactive moments, again, taking a break. And this goes back to, you know, the question about recorded or pre-recorded. There's definitely going to be aspects which can be pre-recorded, but they should be little snippets. And then going back to the live version of the programming, so that you can create these interactive moments. Obviously, in this case, you're making a call to action, especially when you're talking about signing up or volunteering or fundraising, and having the tools available in order to do that. Post-event follow-up, you know, and in this case, this particular follow-up, there's going to be a survey. I'm going to be providing the slides. I'm going to be making myself available for further questions. If you go through the slides and you say, hey, you know what, I forgot to ask this question before, but I'm really curious about this. I think we accidentally crowdsourced next topics when we're talking about the legal and liability aspects of live events and online events specifically, what that looks like from different aspects. Send out more content, so that's definitely something that I'm going to do, especially based on the questions that were made. It's very difficult in 1 hour time to hit every aspect of a topic in depth. So sending out more in-depth information, and especially from the perspective of where the interest was or seems to move to, and having that available. So I have, obviously listed my resources, and those resources can answer the questions, the deeper questions that people have. Hootsuite is another. Resource, and this goes into specifics of what kind of virtual events there are. So how-tos, tutorials, and classes. So this is actually a good example, tutorials of pre-recorded material. Trainings and courses, behind-the-scene tours. This is another aspect, especially when you are engaging with volunteers, donors. How do things work? What's going on behind the scenes? This is not just something for businesses, this is something for organizations as well. And then having interviews with staff, with volunteers, with board members, with students, with permission. Video is very powerful when it comes to that. Interviews and performances, conferences and shows. Bringing video into stories, webinars like the one we're on right now. And again, here are some other tools, webinar tools that I had mentioned. Crowdcast is a really great webinar tool. Webinar Ninja is also another tool. YouTube live streaming. I actually haven't used YouTube live streaming as much just because I have others that are available, and Six Connects is another one that, again, has multiple moving parts. So this is something to really take into consideration, is if you have the capacity. Many organizations may have the capacity, but a lot of organizations do not have the capacity to bring in something that's much larger and unwieldy. So I try to stick to simpler platforms, more accessible platforms. For conferencing and networks, Hey Summit is one that I've been involved in. I haven't actually used it as a host or one who initiates. VFairs, virtual expos. Brella is another one as well. So this is something that I'm going to be sending out along with the presentation. This has a lot of really great information about very specific platforms. And what you really want to do, again, I cannot iterate enough, that have an idea and a plan and an outline of what it is you want your platforms to actually do. One thing, who you have as far as resources who are able to run these particular platforms, because somebody's going to have to actually do the legwork as far as setting it up, learning how to utilize the platform, understanding the usability of the platform and the functionality of the platform. So you really don't want to be investing in a platform and then find out that you do not have the resources for it in some manner. This is my favorite thing, creating a game plan. And they go through that, which is a little bit more detailed than what I provided. And then the thing I cannot stress enough is encouraging engagement as well. Being able to, to have a conversation, that is definitely one of the things that seems to be missing from not being able to have a larger in-person space and being able to navigate the online space. And then these are examples of virtual events that were particularly hosted by businesses. I found it a little bit helpful because they are very, very high in the sky. But I've seen, definitely in New Haven that there's been Facebook Live and Instagram Live concerts of local musicians and artists. And that has built like a really great story as well for our New Haven artist space. Lunch doodles with Mo Williams. So these just little snippets, even the littlest little things, 10 or 15 minutes of a live fill in the blank, and then just making sure that there's a call to action, showing that there's engagement amongst our community. So we have 10 minutes left, and I know that for me, my platform was running for 60 minutes, doing little breaks, and then having 30 minutes of questions. But I think we got a lot of questions sprinkled throughout. However, I do want to spend these last 10 minutes to answer any other questions that people may have just been waiting until the end of the presentation to ask. And also reiterating that I will be providing this presentation, the resources, and additional resources based on the feedback that was provided.
So we did have a question that came in through the chat. Do you have any ideas or resources for icebreakers to kick off or start a virtual session?
Sure. Please, honey.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I mean, yeah, there's so many. So oftentimes, again, when you're thinking about how a session is structured, oftentimes the easiest thing to do is to have people introduce themselves. And there's different ways of doing that, right? You could be just like, who are you and what do you do and what are you trying to get out of the session? I know one of my very good friends who runs online meetings actually says, introduce yourself and give us a rose and a thorn. So basically, like, what was something that happened that was really great today, and what was something that happened that wasn't particularly great today. That is very, connective and personal and that sort of thing. It may just be something like, what are you trying to get out of this? What's something that's really great? Tell us something really amazing.
If you know your party's extension,
somebody's phone is going off.
please listen carefully as some of these options have changed. For sales, press 1. For support, press 2. For bits.
Is somebody not muted?
You have reached the mailbox of.
Let's see. Okay, I think they're muted now.
Okay, sorry. I don't know why I'm saying sorry. So yeah, or you can start a session by, you know, we had talked about doing like a little, you know, something that's pre-recorded. You know, so showing a video of some sort, or, you know, sing a song, recite a poem, have somebody, you know, that sort of thing. And think about too, like what is specific to what your organization is as well. You know, there's lots of different, one of the things may be, you know, depending on how formal it is, have everybody who's coming into a session wear something that is specific to a particular theme. So a hat, a scarf of some sort, a drink, a snack, and kind of talk about, you know, what it is, where it came from as well. Maybe that's something I'll put into the to the after materials as well. What's a good icebreaker?
So we have another one that just came in. Do you have any suggestions for fun things to do during a virtual event to make the meeting more successful and engaging, and to inspire attendees to join?
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, was there more?
And have you attended any over the past few months that you could point, you know, that you could point folks to as a good example of a high level of engagement?
From the perspective of doing something fun and keeping people engaged. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on, you know, the level of ability of doing something fun. So oftentimes doing something active, you know. So I know that sometimes when I jump into meetings, we'll you know, we'll jump up and we'll do something active. So it's like, you know, 10-second dance party is actually one of my favorite things. And I apologize that I did not initiate a 10-second dance party in this particular presentation, which is basically, you know, having a piece of music and saying, okay, we're going to take a little break now and we're going to have a 10-second dance party. It's really a 30-second dance party, but we're making sure that, you know, we're not setting a precedence for like completely going out of control. Yeah, doing jumping jacks, having breakout sessions where you finish somebody's drawing. So somebody starts a drawing based on a prompt of some sort, and the next person doesn't know what the prompt is, and they continue the drawing not knowing what the prompt is, and then seeing what comes out of it. So it's kind of like telephone and Pictionary put together. So those are a couple of different examples. Hopefully that's helpful.
Okay. What tools do you use to finish a drawing?
So interestingly enough, there's a game tool that I'm totally blanking out on right now, where you go into that particular game tool in that particular game and you can finish the drawing. I'm gonna actually check with my, I actually have gaming friends. So I'll check with that and I'll put that in my notes, what that particular platform is. I think it was in Jackbox.tv. I don't know if anybody knows what Jackbox TV is. By now, I think almost everybody might know what Jackbox TV is. I don't know. It's a gaming platform for board and fun games that you can do online, like trivia and drawing and that sort of thing. So that's something that you can download into your phone, so to speak. Everybody can jump onto that and start start drawing away. But again, that's something to think about, again, when you're planning, think about it ahead of time. It's like, do you want to have an online game? Is it accessible? Are you going to have to let people know to download it and to access it? So just things to take into consideration as well.
So we don't have, we did, someone did share that Jackbox TV is fun.
Oh, good.
and then we have, we have someone type in, is that jump box? So can you just clarify
It's Jack, Jack box, BOX. So it's all one word, jackbox.tv.
Great. So we don't have any other questions that have come in through chat. We do have a couple minutes, just about 2-3 minutes left of this morning's virtual workshop. If anybody has any questions they would like to send in through chat, please do. You can also unmute yourself and ask the question directly, whichever you prefer.
Oh my goodness, and I see people now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. So
if we don't have any more questions, oh, hold on. It said,
hold on. Oh, wow. Okay, now I get it.
So we do have, it's in the chat that it would be helpful if you can type.
Yeah, now I'm back in here.
So you can see the chat, Julia?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so we have someone just asking if you can type in the information for the website into the chat rather than spelling it out.
Yep. And I will do that in just a moment because I'm in another screen.
I'd just like to say thank you. This was very informative. It's a great kickstart for us personally, for our organization to get motivated and not be so fearful.
Yeah.
It's it's such an unknown that and an unbudgeted unknown that
Yeah,
and that's piecemeal can be intimidating if we're going to piecemeal it versus taking our budget to invest in a service,
Right. Yeah. No, and I think, I'm hoping that my thought was that the very first thing is to actually think about it from the perspective of what the holistic plan looks like, as opposed to trying to cover the myriad of, platforms and technologies that are available. But really, it's like, why are you using that particular platform? What backup and what are you actually doing? What are the things that it needs to do and that sort of thing? And then once that is covered, then you can, take a look at a chart of like the top 10 blank, right? How many people are attending? How many people are going to be actually within the event? What is the event being used for? What are the moving parts? Once you know what all the moving parts are, then it's easier to make a decision as far as what the technology is going to look like. I know I had mentioned quite a few different pieces of technology, and I'll provide as much information as is available, or as much as from the perspective of where the information is available on the different technologies that are available. But the thing to understand about the technologies, is what they're going to do for your organization in particular, and how your organization is going to be able to utilize it with the resource that you currently have available to yourselves.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone very much for joining us this morning. As mentioned, we will be sending out the slides and a few other really informative pieces of information. Included in that email will be a link to a survey. It shouldn't take you more than about 2 minutes to complete the survey. Please do. It helps us evaluate our workshop offerings and plan for the future. I hope that all of you have a wonderful Friday and a fabulous weekend. Thank you, everyone.